Oh, sorry for the shaking. Anyway, welcome to this video now. Um, I want to address, not really even the elephant in the room, but like, okay, anyway. I deleted my previous video because I just felt like it was not conducive in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't really doing anything. It wasn't benefiting anyone. I don't even know why I made it. I was going through it. But we are here now and we are doing A-okay. Anyway, in this video, I wanted to talk about something that I kind of noticed and I thought was very interesting. And I want to know if other NI dominants can relate to this. So, I produce music. If you didn't know, now you do. And if you are curious to check out my music, you can go ahead and go to soundcloud.com. What is it? I have it pulled up here. soundcloud.com/Jocelyn Leo. So JOSELYNLEO, all lowercase, all put together. soundcloud.com/Jocelyn Leo. Anyway, so I was kind of thinking about it, and actually I want the brightness again. What was the tab I had? This is the tab I had open. I want the brightness from the screen. Anyway, whatever. I was kind of giving it thought, and when I produce music, I've kind of noticed that it's tricky. I'm not gonna say difficult, but it is tricky for me to get started on something. Like, what I mean is like, unless I have an idea beforehand, and even then, but if I have an idea of something beforehand, it's a little easier to get started on a new project. But if I don't, it's challenging for me to think of a new idea to work with, right? Usually what ends up happening is I'll spend who knows how long just like messing around. Maybe I'm messing around with some drums, a drum pattern, and certain like beats and stuff like that. Maybe I'm messing around with a certain bass line and just fiddling around. Maybe there's a chord progression that I want to try out or whatever. Point is, I'll usually do something along these avenues to try to get something started. But more often than not, it's very difficult for me to find that footing at first because there are so many different things. There's so many different avenues that these ideas can go to, right? My mind is like, okay, well, I have this chord progression. It sounds kind of melancholic, but if I change like a few notes around and change the chord progression a little bit, it can start sounding a little bit more like, still on like the melancholic side of things, but a little bit more inspirational, right? Same thing with bass lines. Oh, this bass line sounds good. I just don't like the rhythm of it. And if I change the rhythm to this kind of rhythm, maybe that can work a little bit better. And I end up doing that and overanalyzing it. And I keep seeing these possibilities of slight altercations that I can make to the music to make it sound a little better. However, once I land on something, it is incredibly easy for me to then expand upon it, right? So it's difficult for me to get my footing at first, but once I find my footing and once I'm like, holy shit, this bass line is amazing and I really want to work with this bass line, or this chord progression is really hitting me and I really want to make a song on this chord progression, or this beat and drum loop is really good and I really like it, and I let me get a bass going along with it and I have drums and bass now, right? Once I get my footing with music, it's so easy for me to expand upon it. And I want to know if other NI dominants can relate to this, because I feel like this is such an NI dominant thing, right? It sounds like it's more NE, right? Oh, you're expanding upon something. But the thing is, it's actually more NI, because NE would be more expanding upon the idea in the sense of like, they may or may not, I'm not any dominant, so I can't really speak on this front, but the way I kind of conceptualize it is they may or may not struggle to come up with ideas. I think it'd probably be easier for an NE dominant to come up with ideas, and they'll be like, this bass line, and then, oh, I came up with another completely different bass line, and this chord progression, but here's a different chord progression. But then it's going to be hard for them to expand upon those ideas into full-fledged songs, because there's so many possibilities. There's so many ideas running through their head constantly. Where NI dominance is, it's hard to get that footing in, but once you do get that footing in, at least for me, I can expand upon the idea. So I'm not expanding outward necessarily. I'm expanding the core concept, the core idea of the song that I was able to find initially. And then I can make a whole song based on that, right? So I have a chord progression that I really like. I can now work on the bass line, and I get a bass line that works really well with the chord progression. And then through the bass line and chord progression, I can now think of certain melodies that can go along with this bass line and chord progression, and then the harmonies to those melodies. And then with all of that down, I can come up with a good drum pattern and, drums and stuff like that for the song, right? That's kind of how my workflow is with music. It's very difficult for me to find my initial footing, but once I find it, it's very easy for me to expand upon it and add little flares and little things here and little things there, right? And I want to know, do other NI dominants relate to this? If you draw, is it hard for you to think of and get started on some kind of drawing, and you draw like this figure, but you're like, I don't really like this figure too much. So you erase a few details and you add other things. Maybe you start working on like a background. Maybe they're, walking in the forest, and then you decide, I don't really want them in the forest though, because I don't know, it just doesn't fit the vibe of what I want really. And then you're like, okay, let me switch it to the city. And then you draw the city, you start laying out a city, and then it like clicks in your mind. Oh my God, this is where I want to go. I want to draw this person walking in the city. That's a great, picture to draw. Do other NI dominants have this kind of thing when it comes to art? I feel like it can't be unique to me. There are over 8 billion, almost 9 billion people on Earth. I sincerely doubt I will have any unique experiences. So I'm just very curious to know. I think it's very interesting how your dominant function really does kind of affect the way that you work with art if you are an artist. I can only imagine for someone who's like a TI dominant is going to be more like structure based, right? They've heard different types of music and different genres of music, and they know the structure of this music style, and they can come up with very linear, melodies and linear bass lines and linear drums and stuff like that can work for mainstream audiences because they've heard so much of it. And this is actually kind of an interesting thing now that I think about it, because since I have TI, I can also do that, and I have. A lot of my music is either something you've never heard before or similar to things you've heard before because of that NI and TI. I feel like when I'm working on music, they really do, those two functions do communicate with each other. If I'm going for a more streamlined sound, something that can be played on the radio, the structure of the song is super, pop structure. There's intro, bridge, verse 1, bridge, chorus 1, bridge, verse 2, or bridge 2, verse 2, bridge 2, or whatever, and then, breakdown, and then verse 3, chorus 3, whatever. Not verse 3, but chorus 3, so on and so forth, right? It follows that very simple structure, right? Like, I don't think I did a good job explaining it, but it's like intro, verse, bridge, chorus, verse, bridge, breakdown, chorus, and then like outro, right? That's a very simple structure for any pop song ever. If you want to produce music, that is one of the things you got to learn, is the structure of music. But anyway, I digress. So when I do produce music and I'm going for that more streamlined, like pop kind of sound, that is the structure I follow. It's very linear, it's very structured. The sounds that I use are very meticulous, very, it's very purposeful. A lot of the sounds are very purposeful. There's going to be ear candy here and there, but a lot of the things that I do are very purposeful when I'm in that like TI mood of keeping things very structured. But when I'm more NI, relying more on NI rather than TI for music production, NI is just gonna do what it does, right? I have a lot of songs that I've made that are truly like, okay, this is not following necessarily a certain type of structure, right? They do follow a structure. Like, for example, I have one of my songs called Zhu, the City of Ascendancy. That song does follow a structure. It has like an intro thing into like a kind of verse chorus kind of thing. And then it goes into like this main motif. And then there's like the big main motif towards the end. And then it like outros to the end of the song, right? It does follow a structure because music kind of has to follow a structure of some kind. If not, it's jazz. And, I'm actually not entirely opposed to producing jazz music. I just never done it. But point is, when NI takes over, it makes its own structure for what sounds good. TI will still play a role to keep things kind of, structured. But NI will do most of the work of where the ideas kind of want to go. But when I'm in TI mode, it's very pop structure because that is what is well known. That's what will land best with most people because most people understand that structure. They speak that language. They understand that language of music. It's easy for them to digest. Anyway, this is a shorter video, but I just really wanted to get that idea out there because I think it's a very interesting idea. And I want to know if other NI dominant artists out there can relate to that kind of way of making art, where it's like kind of hard to come up with an initial idea. But then once you have that initial footing for an idea, it's way easier to expand upon that idea and get it into a full, complete, like cohesive project. And I'm sure it's probably different for any people, any dominance, and any other function type dominant, like I mentioned. But anyway, I'm just very curious to know what your guys' input is. And if you are an artist who is an NI dominant and you feel like you can relate to what I mentioned in this video, I would love to hear it. But yeah, as always, don't forget to subscribe, up, down, left, right, pink and blue, Dance Dance Revolution, wherever that subscribe button is for you. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye. Take care.